The day I turned 70, my son-in-law stood up at his own daughter's wedding, raised his glass to toast the bride and groom, and then looked straight at me and said I was a burden nobody had asked for. My grandson never expected what I pulled out of my briefcase 20 minutes later. I want to tell you how I got to that tent, because none of it makes sense unless you understand what came before. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I spent 41 years running a small fleet of delivery trucks out of a gravel lot in Ohio, built it from 2 vans and a busted phone line into something that fed 3 families besides my own, and sold it the year my wife got sick so I could be home with her every single day she had left. I am not a rich man by the standards of the people at that wedding tent. But I am not the man they think I am, either. That distinction is going to matter very soon. My daughter, Emily, was my whole world after her mother passed. I raised her alone from the time she was 14. I learned to braid hair from a video on a library computer. And I sat through parent-teacher conferences where I was the only father, the only man, the only person who showed up in work boots because I'd come straight from a delivery route. I never once complained, because complaining wasn't going to raise her. Showing up was going to raise her. So I showed up. She married young to a man named Curtis, and I told myself that was fine, that was her life, and my job now was to step back and let her build it. Curtis worked in something called strategic partnerships for a software company, which, as far as I could tell, meant he took a lot of people to lunch. He was polished. He had good teeth and a firm handshake, and he called me sir the first year, which I appreciated, and then he stopped calling me anything at all, which I noticed but didn't say anything about. They had a son, my grandson Miles, and Miles became to me what Lily is to some other old man in some other story, the one bright window in a house that had otherwise gone quiet since my wife died. Miles had my late wife's eyes, this pale hazel that changed color depending on the light, and every time I looked at him I saw her looking back at me. And I would have walked through fire for that boy without blinking. But something shifted about 2 years ago. Emily started answering my calls with one-word sentences. Visits that used to happen every other weekend stretched to once a month, then once every few months. Curtis's parents, I learned secondhand, had bought Emily and Curtis a house in a gated community 40 minutes outside the city, a house with a pool and a home theater and a circular driveway, and it seemed like once they moved in, the world I used to be part of got smaller and smaller in their rearview mirror. I told myself it was normal. Kids grow up. They marry into new families. And sometimes the new family has more shine to it, more rooms, more staff at the holiday parties, and an old widower with grease still under his fingernails from 40 years of engine work doesn't always fit the photograph they're trying to take. I told myself I understood. I told myself I wasn't hurt. I have told myself a lot of things over the years that weren't true, and that might be the biggest one. Then the wedding invitation came, not for Emily, she was already married, but for Curtis's younger sister, Whitney. Curtis's family was hosting a massive wedding on their estate, the kind with a tent the size of an airplane hangar and a live 12-piece band, and Emily called me herself, which she hadn't done in months, to ask me to come. "Dad, it means a lot to Curtis's family that you're there," she said. "Miles keeps asking about you. He drew you a picture of your old dog. Please come." I would have crawled there on my hands if she'd asked me to. So, of course, I said yes. I bought a new suit for the occasion, navy blue, the first suit I'd purchased in 11 years, because the one I owned still fit, but it had started to feel like something from another decade of my life, a decade with my wife still in it. I got a haircut. I polished my good shoes, the ones I only wear to funerals and now, apparently, weddings. And 3 days before the event, almost as an afterthought, I called my old friend and attorney, a man named Walter Greer, and asked him a question that had been sitting in the back of my mind for longer than I want to admit. I'll get to that call. It matters more than anything else in this story, but I need you to sit with me in that tent first, the way I had to sit in it, not knowing what was coming. The estate was somewhere outside Columbus, a sprawling property with white fences and a lake stocked with actual swans, if you can believe that, and a tent set up on the back lawn that could have held a Boeing. There were easily 250 guests. Waitstaff in black vests moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. A string quartet played during the cocktail hour before the 12-piece band took over for the reception. I stood near the edge of it all in my navy suit, feeling like a man who had wandered into the wrong photograph, and I scanned the crowd for the only two faces I actually wanted to see. I found Miles first. He was 8 years old now, all elbows and cowlicks, wearing a little suit jacket that made him look like he was playing dress-up in his father's closet. He was chasing another boy around a dessert table shaped like a wedding cake itself, and when he spotted me, his whole face lit up like a struck match. "Grandpa," he shouted, and he ran at me full speed, and I dropped to one knee right there on the lawn, not caring one bit about the grass stains on my new suit pants, and opened my arms. That is the moment I want you to remember, because everything after it happened so fast that if you blink, you'll miss the last good second of that day. His arms were almost around my neck when I heard Curtis's voice, sharp and carrying, from somewhere behind me, "Miles, get away from him, now." I turned, still on one knee, and saw Curtis walking toward us with his jaw set, his tie already loosened, a drink in one hand. Emily was a few steps behind him, her face pale, her eyes darting between her husband and me like she was watching a car accident she couldn't stop. "Curtis, what's going on?" I said, and I want you to notice that I said it calmly, because I still believed, in that moment, that this was some kind of misunderstanding. "What's going on?" Curtis repeated, and he laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that I am done pretending in front of my family that everything is fine. That's what's going on." He was drunk. Not stumbling, but loose in the way a man gets after 4 or 5 drinks when he's been sitting on something for a long time and finally lets himself say it. And he had chosen his sister's wedding, in front of 250 guests, to let it out. "Curtis, please," Emily said, grabbing his arm. "Not here." "No, everyone should hear this," he said, and he raised his voice, and I watched heads start to turn from the nearby tables, the way a crowd turns toward a sound it can't quite place yet, sensing something is about to happen before it understands what. "You know what it's like," Curtis said, looking now not at me but out at the gathering crowd, playing to them, having to explain to my family, every single holiday, why my father-in-law shows up smelling like a garage, why he can't afford a decent gift for his own grandson, why my wife has to apologize for him before he even walks in the door. "Curtis," Emily's voice cracked. "Nah. He has been a burden on this family since the day I met him," Curtis went on, louder now, and I felt every eye in that tent land on me at once, felt the particular, total silence that comes when a few hundred people all stop their private conversations at the same instant. "A burden nobody asked for. And today, of all days, I am done pretending otherwise. I want to tell you I had some clever retort ready. I didn't. And I didn't." I knelt there on the grass with my grandson's small hand still in mine, and I felt something I hadn't felt since I buried my wife, a hollowing out, a total absence, like someone had reached into my chest and taken the floor out from under my heart. Miles looked up at his father, then at me, confusion crumpling his little face. "Grandpa's not a burden," he said, in that clear, unfiltered way children have of saying the truest thing in the room. "Grandpa taught me how to fish. Miles, go find your cousins." Curtis snapped, and something in his tone made the boy flinch and let go of my hand and walk away with his head down. And that I will tell you honestly that hurt me more than anything Curtis had said about me directly. Watching that light in my grandson dim, even for a second, because of something his father did. I stood up slowly. "But idea, my knees aren't what they used to be," and every guest in that tent watched me do it, watched the old man rise off the grass in his good suit with dirt on one knee, and I felt, for one terrible moment, exactly as small as Curtis wanted me to feel. Then something in me changed. I want to be precise about this, because it wasn't rage, not the kind that makes your hands shake and your vision blur. It was something colder and steadier than that. It was clarity. I had spent 2 years telling myself I understood why I'd been pushed to the edges of my daughter's new life. I had spent 2 years making excuses for a man who, apparently, this entire time, had been quietly building a case against me in his own head, waiting for an audience big enough to deliver the verdict. And I realized, standing there with grass on my knee and my grandson's confused face burned into my memory, that I was done accepting a verdict I hadn't earned. "Curtis," I said, and my voice came out steadier than I expected, steady enough that the low murmur running through the crowd quieted again. "Are you finished?" He blinked, thrown by the calm in my voice. "Excuse me? I'm asking if you're finished," I said, "because if you are, I'd like everyone here to hear a few things too, since apparently we're doing this." And this isn't the time, Emily started, but I held up a hand, gently, and she stopped. No, your husband decided it was the time, I said. So let's finish what he started. I walked, unhurried, back to the small table near the entrance of the tent, where I had left my briefcase, an old leather one, scuffed at the corners, that I'd carried to every important meeting of my working life. I had brought it that day for a reason I hadn't told Emily, hadn't told anyone except Walter Greer 3 days earlier on the phone. I want to be honest with you, I hadn't brought it planning to use it like this. I had brought it hoping I would never have to use it at all. I set the briefcase on a nearby table, opened it in front of the gathering crowd, and pulled out a folder of documents that Walter had overnighted to me the day before. Curtis, do you know how you and Emily were able to afford the down payment on your house? I asked. He frowned. My parents helped us. Everyone knows that. Your parents contributed $30,000, I said. I have the wire transfer records here, if you'd like to see them, because your father showed them to me himself 2 years ago at your Christmas party, rather proudly, I might add. Your house cost $1.4 million. Would you like to guess who covered the difference in financing, through a trust neither of you knew existed so that the loan would even clear underwriting? The color started to drain from his face the way I imagine mine had drained from Curtis's words minutes before. That's not my father-in-law, doesn't have that kind of money, he said. But he said it to the crowd now, not to me. The way a man talks when he's already losing an argument and hoping the room will bail him out. I sold my company for considerably more than anyone at these tables has ever assumed, I said, and I said it plainly, without pride, because that was never the part of my life I wanted people to know about. I wanted to be known for showing up, not for a number in a bank account. I structured it that way on purpose, because I did not want my daughter's happiness to have a price tag attached to it, and I did not want a son-in-law who only respected me because of a figure on a statement. I wanted to be respected for being her father. I see now that experiment failed. Emily had gone very still beside her husband, her hand pressed over her mouth. The trust that guaranteed your loan, I continued, turning the page in the folder, has a standard clause, which Walter here can explain to you in far more technical language than I'm capable of, that allows the guarantor, that's me, to call the guarantee and require refinancing or repayment under specific conditions. One of those conditions, as of an amendment I signed 3 days ago, is public humiliation of the guarantor by an immediate family member of the primary borrower. I watched that land on him like a physical blow. Around us, the crowd had gone from murmuring to absolutely silent, 250 people holding their champagne glasses and their breath at the same time. You can't do that, Curtis said. That's insane. Emily, tell him he can't do that. But Emily wasn't looking at Curtis anymore. She was looking at me, and there were tears running freely down her face now, and I couldn't tell, in that moment, if they were tears for me or tears for the life she was about to watch come apart at the seams in front of her husband's entire extended family. Probably both. I have come to believe, in the time since, that it was both. I'm not doing anything today, Curtis, I said. I'm simply telling everyone here the truth, since you decided the truth was a good topic for toasts. The truth is that I have never asked either of you for a single thing in 6 years. The truth is that when your parents needed to save face at your own wedding because their business had a rough year, I quietly covered $40,000 of catering costs and asked that nobody know, including you. The truth is that the reason I can't afford a decent gift, as you put it, is that every single gift I've ever given Miles has come out of the account I use for his college fund, because I would rather he have a future than have me look impressive at a party. I could see Curtis's father now, standing near the edge of the crowd, a heavy-set man in a gray suit whose face had gone the particular shade of red that comes from being exposed in front of your own guests. And the burden you mentioned, I said, closing the folder, the one nobody asked for. You're right, Curtis. Nobody asked me to quietly hold this family together financially for 6 years while getting mocked behind closed doors for the way my hands look after 40 years of honest work. Nobody asked me to do that. I did it because I love my daughter and I love my grandson, and I thought, foolishly it seems, that love doesn't require credit. The silence that followed was the kind you could feel on your skin. Curtis opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Whatever he'd rehearsed in his head over 2 years of quiet resentment had clearly not accounted for this response, and I watched him search for words and come up empty. The same way I imagine some other unfortunate soul in some other family, at some other party, once watched a woman search for a story that could no longer hold together once the truth was standing right in front of everyone in high definition. I am not a cruel man. I did not enjoy what happened next, and if you're waiting for me to tell you I felt triumphant, I won't lie to you and say that. What I felt was tired, the particular exhaustion of a man who has spent years being patient with people who mistook his patience for weakness. Dad! Emily's voice broke on the word. Tharia. She crossed the small distance between us, ignoring the entire tent of watching guests, and put her arms around me the way she used to when she was small and scared of thunderstorms. Dad, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know he felt this way. I didn't know about any of it, the trust, the catering, none of it. I know, sweetheart, I said, and I held her, and for a moment, the 250 guests, and the swans on the lake and the 12-piece band that had gone completely silent didn't exist at all. It was just my daughter, crying into my shoulder the way she had the night we buried her mother. Curtis's father pushed through the crowd toward us, his face a mixture of fury and damage control. This is not the time or place, he hissed at me, low enough that only our small circle could hear. You've humiliated my son, at his own sister's wedding. And, with respect, I said, and I meant it, because I did not want a war with this man, only an end to being treated like an embarrassment in my own family. Your son humiliated himself. I only supplied the facts. Whitney, the bride, God bless her, was standing a few feet away in her wedding dress, mascara streaked down her face, and I felt a genuine pang of guilt that her day had been swallowed by this. I walked over to her before anything else happened. I am sorry this happened at your wedding, I told her. You deserve a perfect day, and I take responsibility for the part of this mess that's mine to own. But I did not start it. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I know, she said quietly. Everyone saw. It's not your fault, sir. Sir. Nobody at that estate had called me sir in 2 years except the caterers. I found Miles a few minutes later, sitting alone at the edge of the dance floor, swinging his legs and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. I sat down next to him, careful of my knees again, and he leaned into my side without a word. Is Dad in trouble? He asked. Your dad said some things he shouldn't have said. I told him, choosing every word with the kind of care I hadn't used on Curtis at all. Grown-ups do that sometimes when they're carrying something heavy and don't know how to put it down the right way. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you. It doesn't mean I don't love you. Both of those things are still true. You're not a burden, Miles said fiercely, and there were tears in his eyes now too. This brave, furious 8-year-old, defending me against the world. You're the best, Grandpa. Thank you, Bud, I said, and I meant it more than he will understand for a lot of years yet. The wedding, somehow, limped forward. The band started playing again, tentatively, and small pockets of conversation resumed, though every single one of them, I have no doubt, was about what had just happened rather than the bride and groom. I did not stay for the cake. I found Walter, who had driven up separately and been sitting quietly near the back the entire time I had asked him to be there, just in case, though I'd hoped I would never need him, and the two of us walked out to the parking lot together while the sun started to go down behind that absurd, beautiful, borrowed estate. You didn't have to use the trust clause, Walter said as we walked. You could have just told him quietly, later. I know, I said, but he made it public. I decided the truth should be public too. If he wanted an audience for my humiliation, he was going to get one for the real story. I want to tell you the rest of it now, because a story like this doesn't mean anything if I just leave you at the parking lot with the sun going down. Curtis and Emily separated for a while after that. Not immediately, that would make for a cleaner story, but real life rarely hands you clean endings on schedule. It took about 4 months. 4 months of tense dinners and one very long, very hard conversation between Emily and me at my kitchen table where she told me things about her marriage I'd never known, including that Curtis's resentment toward me had been simmering long before that wedding and had far more to do with his own father's disappointment in him than it ever really had to do with me. Hurt people, I've learned, in a lifetime of watching them, do not always aim their pain at the person who caused it. Sometimes they aim it at whoever is standing closest and easiest to blame. Curtis and I have not fully repaired things, and I won't pretend to you that we have. But he called me 8 months after that wedding, on a Tuesday night, and apologized, not a polished apology, not one that sounded rehearsed for an audience the way his cruelty had been, but a stammering, embarrassed, genuinely ashamed one. He told me he'd been going to therapy. He told me his own father had never once told him he was proud of him, not once, and that somewhere along the way he'd decided the only way to feel bigger was to make someone else feel smaller. And I happened to be standing there. I don't know if I've forgiven him completely. I'm not sure forgiveness is a single door you walk through once. I think it's more like a long hallway you keep walking down, a little further every year, and some days you make more progress than others. What I do know is that Miles spends every other weekend at my house now, same as before all of this started, and last month he asked me to teach him to change the oil in my truck. And I got to watch my late wife's eyes light up over an engine block the same way they used to light up over a garden. Emily and I talk every single day now, sometimes just to say good morning, which is a gift I did not have 2 years ago and do not take for granted for one single second. I still have the briefcase. I keep it in my front hall closet now, not because I'm waiting for another battle, but because it reminds me of something I want you to take with you, whoever you are, wherever you're listening to this from tonight. For years, I let people believe that quiet meant weak. I let a man half my age tell 250 strangers that I was a burden, and I almost believed him myself, right up until the moment I remembered that a man can spend his whole life giving without asking for credit and still, when the moment comes, stand up and tell the truth without apologizing for it. You do not have to be loud to be strong. You do not have to raise your voice or your hand to prove you will not be erased from your own family's story. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is open a briefcase instead of a fist and let the truth do what anger never could hold up, in the daylight in front of everyone, exactly as long as it needs to. That's the lesson I've tried to give my grandson, and it's the one I'll leave with you. Being underestimated is not the same as being small. Sometimes it's just the world's way of not looking closely enough. Give it time, and give it the truth, and let it look again.